welcome back to my channel. My name is Cheryl, and today I'm here to bring you my spoiler-free review for Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman. This is the first book in the Dragonlance Chronicles, and I have quite a few thoughts about this book. Like I said, this is the first book in the Dragonlance Chronicles series. Now, this series has 4 books in the original Chronicles, but I found out after starting this book that there are 190 books written in this universe, which is just... I've never been more intimidated to start a series until after learning this, because 190 books, like, that would take me over 2 years of just reading this series to get through at the current pace that I read. That is insane. Now, these series take place with different characters, with different timelines, they're written by different authors, but the connecting thread is that they are all set in this universe. Now, this universe was actually inspired by a D&D campaign that the authors played. I don't know if it has any ties to the D&D lore. I'm not 100% familiar on that end, but it is very, very high fantasy. I would not recommend this book for people who are just starting out on high fantasy or who are still intimidated by high fantasy, because it does info dump a lot in the fantasy world, because there are a lot of rules and a lot of things that it needs to establish, but on the same front, it assumes you know how fantasy worlds work and doesn't hold your hand at all. From the very beginning, you are just thrust into the story, and it goes. So the general synopsis of this book is that it is about a group of friends who reunite, I think, after 5 years, and they all kind of went off and did their own thing, but with the one common goal or one common thing that they were going to reunite after 5 years at this one specific location. And yeah, the story kind of takes off from there. So my overall general thoughts about this book were that I really like high fantasy, so I enjoyed it on that aspect. I enjoyed the wide cast of characters. There were a lot of characters to get to know and a lot of different tropes/roles they represented. There was the dwarf, there was the cleric, there was the mage, there was every single role you would have expected to find in a group of like D&D characters, essentially, you found in this book. Another aspect I liked of it was that it was very fast-paced. There was a lot of action that happened basically from the first page. When the story took off, it didn't stop until like the very last page, and even then I felt like it kind of abruptly stopped. Like there was supposed to be more than you even got in this book. There was so much that these authors packed into one story that it was just mind-boggling, to be honest. And like I said, I really did enjoy a lot of the high fantasy aspects of it. You know, there were elves, there were humans, there were dwarves, there was races that I believe that the story made up. At least I haven't seen them before. And there were so many different aspects of high fantasy that I was really able to appreciate, but didn't feel overwhelming, at least to me, and that's just because I'm very familiar with high fantasy. I don't really get intimidated when I read high fantasy series, but like I said, if you do, I might take a step back before picking up this one. There were a few things that I did dislike about this book, and I'll kind of get into those now. The big one is that this book was fairly sexist at times. The women in this book were really only driven by one thing, and that was love, and it was either love for a particular character or they were driven by their desire to please a particular character. The particular character always was a man, and so they were never striving to succeed or to better themselves for themselves. They were only ever striving to succeed or to be better for this man that they were trying to impress or that they loved or whatever. And I felt that to be a little frustrating because I wanted to get to know these characters for who they were, but you didn't get that at all. But basically, there were no strong women in this, or if they were strong, they were only strong because of the men around them. Another issue I had with this book is actually kind of contradicting, I guess, one of the things I liked about it, and that is I had an issue with how many characters were introduced. Even though I did like that there were a wide cast of characters, that you got to know a lot of different characters, this book followed like 7 different characters, and it's a fairly average sized book, and it really wasn't able to devote very much time to each character, and I really hope that's something that gets fleshed out in the later books, because like, you got a little snippet of each character, but that's about it. You really didn't see any character growth, any character development. You really didn't get much backstory for them. They just kind of had their role, they filled the role, and that was it. As a result, a lot of these characters kind of blend together. They were not really unique. I didn't find any distinctive characteristics about them. And yeah, I wish I got to know these characters a little bit better. I think the authors just had too many characters introduced at once. Another thing that I didn't particularly care for is the fact that it felt like a very rushed book. You kind of got thrown in from the very get-go, and it didn't let up until the very last page, like I said, which is a good thing. It kept me interested. I was enjoying it. I never once found myself bored during this book, but I did feel like the authors tried to put too much into one book. There wasn't really good pacing with this story. Like I said, it was just a constant go, 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 go. The characters were doing one thing and then going off to another and then immediately doing another thing. As a result, it just felt like this book probably could have been split into 2 books and then fleshed out a little more, and I feel like that would have been more successful. And like I said, this wasn't a personal con for me, but it could be for you, and that's just, you do need to like high fantasy, and you need to be able to not be intimidated by high fantasy to dive into this one, because like I said, it's not a very long book, but it is the most high fantasy book I have ever read. It has all of the tropes you would expect to see, and it has an entire unique system of magic, entire unique societies, and you don't really get that much about them, so you just kind of have to roll with it, and if that intimidates you, I would not recommend picking this book up. Also, I did forget to mention when I was talking about the sexism, is that this book was published in 1984, and I don't know if that has something to do with the attitudes of the time, because I was not alive during that time, and I don't think I've read very much fiction from that time, so I don't know if that's very common. Now, if that's the case, just because it's common doesn't mean it's alright, so yeah. But overall, those are the things I liked and disliked about this book. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a rating of 3.75. I do intend to continue on with the series, at least the original 4 books, the Dragonlance Chronicles, because I am curious to see what happens next. It kind of did leave off on a cliffhanger-y ending, and yeah, I want to know what happens next. I don't know if I'm going to continue on past the series, because like I said, 190 books. But anyway, that's my spoiler-free review for Dragons of Autumn Twilight by Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman. Let me know in the comments down below if you've even heard of this series before, or any high fantasy book that has ever intimidated you, or that you have found way more intense than you expected. As always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!